Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Wanderlust Vibes. I'm Sarah, your ever curious, always exploring co host. And joining me today, as always, is my awesome travel buddy and co host, Alex.
That's right. Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and we're super excited to kick off this podcast with you guys. We've been talking about this for a while now, haven't we, Sarah?
Oh, yeah, travel is something we're both so passionate about, and we figured, why not start a podcast where we can chat about all the ins and outs of exploring the world? Whether you're a seasoned traveler or someone who dreams of packing a bag and going on your first big adventure, we want this to be a place where we can share stories, tips, and just our general love for travel.
Exactly. We're going to dive into all kinds of topics: solo travel, budget tips, crazy stories from the road, cultural experiences, and even how to stay sane during long flights. And of course, we'll sprinkle in some personal anecdotes because, let's face it, we've had some pretty wild experiences.
Laughs. Oh, yes, we have. But first, let's start with today's topic, the art of travel. What does traveling mean to us, and how has it changed our lives? I think we both have pretty different yet complementary perspectives on this, and it'll be fun to unpack it together.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get into it.
So, Alex, let's kick it off with a simple question. What does travel mean to you? How would you define it in your life?
Oof, starting with the big questions already, huh? Laughs. Well, for me, travel is it's freedom, you know? It's this feeling of stepping out of your routine, breaking free from the everyday monotony, and just opening yourself up to new experiences. Whether it's trying new foods, meeting new people, or seeing landscapes that you couldn't even imagine, travel is this constant state of discovery. What about you?
I think you hit the nail on the head with freedom. For me, travel is also about perspective. It's this reminder that the world is so much bigger than my bubble, and there's always something new to learn. Every place I've been has taught me something about the people there, about their culture, but also about myself. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think that's one of the most underrated parts of traveling, what you learn about yourself. Like, remember that time we were in Japan and we got completely lost in Kyoto?
Oh my God, yes. That was such a mess. We were wandering around with no map, no GPS, and barely any language skills between us. I was freaking out internally.
Same here. But that's the thing. Looking back, it's one of my favorite memories from that trip. It taught us to trust in the journey a bit more, to stay calm and adapt. Plus, we found that little hidden temple that wasn't on any of the travel guides.
Yes, that's what I love about travel, the surprises. Sometimes the most memorable moments aren't the ones you planned for. Like, you set out with this itinerary, but it's the detours that end up being the best parts.
I totally agree. That reminds me of the time we were in Morocco and we decided to ditch the guidebook and just wander around the Medina and Marrakesh. That was such a cool experience. Do you remember how we stumbled into that local market?
Oh, yeah, the market with all those beautiful spices and rugs. I still have the rug I bought that day. That trip taught me a lot about slowing down, too. I used to be such a planner, and I'd stress about every little detail. But I realized that travel doesn't always have to be about ticking off every tourist spot. Sometimes it's just about soaking in the atmosphere.
Yes, slowing down is key. I think that's something we both had to learn the hard way. When we first started traveling together, we were always rushing from place to place. We had these insane itineraries, trying to cram in as much as possible. It wasn't until we started taking things slower that we really began to appreciate the moments in between, you know?
Definitely. I feel like there's this pressure, especially with social media these days, to always be doing something. You see people posting photos of these epic adventures and think, I have to do it all. But honestly, some of my favorite memories are the quiet moments, like watching the sunset in Santorini or just having a coffee at a little cafe in Paris.
Exactly. I think that's part of the art of travel, learning to let go of expectations and being present. It's about embracing the experience for what it is, rather than what you think it should be.
That's a really good point. And speaking of letting go of expectations, I feel like one of the biggest lessons I've learned from travel is flexibility. You can plan all you want, but sometimes things just don't go according to plan. And that's okay. Remember when we were supposed to take that train to Florence and it got canceled last minute?
Oh my God, yes. And we were so frustrated at first. But then we ended up spending an extra day in Venice, which turned out to be incredible. We found that little neighborhood away from all the tourists, and it was one of the best parts of the trip.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think it's important to go into any trip with an open mind. Things will go wrong, and that's just part of the experience. But sometimes those wrong turns lead to even better experiences.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into another aspect of travel, the connections you make. I know you're more of a people person than I am, but I've definitely come to appreciate the way travel brings people together. Whether it's meeting other travelers or locals, there's something about being out of your comfort zone that makes you more open to new friendships.
Oh, for sure. Some of the best conversations I've had have been with complete strangers in random places, like that time we met those backpackers from Australia in Croatia. We ended up spending the whole day with them, and it was such a blast.
Yeah, they were great. I think travel really breaks down barriers. You realize that no matter where people are from, we're all just trying to enjoy life and make the most of our experiences.
Definitely. And it makes you more empathetic, too. When you see how people live in different parts of the world, it puts things into perspective. You start to appreciate the little things more and realize how interconnected we all are.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the reasons I think everyone should try to travel, even if it's just a short trip to a nearby city. It changes you in ways you don't even realize until you look back.
Yeah, travel is so transformative. And speaking of that, do you think there's a particular trip that changed you the most?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think for me, it was probably when I traveled solo through Southeast Asia. That was a game changer. I was on my own for the first time in a completely unfamiliar place, and I had to rely on myself for everything. It was scary at first, but it ended up being the most empowering experience of my life. What about you?
Oh, that's such a good one. For me, I think it was our trip to India. That was one of the most eye opening experiences. The colors, the chaos, the warmth of the people. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It made me realize how much beauty there is in the world, even in places that aren't polished or picture perfect.
I remember that trip. India is one of those places that really challenges you, but in the best way possible. It's intense, but it teaches you so much about patience and resilience.
Exactly. It made me appreciate the beauty in imperfection and reminded me that travel isn't always comfortable, but that's what makes it so rewarding.
100%. It's those challenging moments that make the good ones even sweeter. And that's why I think travel is so important. It pushes you outside of your comfort zone and forces you to grow.
Absolutely. And on that note, what's the next destination on your bucket list? Where are you itching to go next?
I've been dying to visit New Zealand. The landscapes there just look unreal. What about you?
Oh, New Zealand is definitely on my list too. But I think my next big trip will be South America. I've always wanted to hike to Machu Picchu and explore Patagonia.
That sounds incredible. We'll have to compare notes once we both get to those places.
Traveling in Switzerland, Sarah and Alex's adventure.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Exploring the World with Sarah and Alex. Today, we're coming to you live from one of the most beautiful countries in the world, Switzerland.
That's right. Switzerland is a dream destination for so many reasons. The snow-capped mountains, pristine lakes, and those cute little towns that look like they're straight out of a fairy tale.
Honestly, Switzerland has been on my travel bucket list for ages, and now that we're here, I can't believe how stunning it is. The Swiss Alps, the crystal clear lakes, it's like stepping into a postcard.
Yeah, it's one of those places where every corner you turn, there's something that makes you gasp. Whether it's the sight of a mountain reflecting perfectly in a lake or a charming village nestled in the valley, it's just breathtaking. And we have so much to explore. Should we start by telling everyone where we are right now?
Absolutely, right now, we're sitting on the Glacier Express, probably the most famous train in Switzerland. It's called the world's slowest express train because it takes you through some of the most scenic parts of the Swiss Alps at a leisurely pace.
Yeah, it's not about getting anywhere fast. It's about soaking in the views. We're traveling from Zermatt, which is at the base of the Matterhorn, to St. Moritz, one of the most luxurious ski resorts in Switzerland.
And let me tell you, the views are unreal. We've already passed through mountain valleys, rivers, and these old stone bridges that look like something out of a fantasy novel.
The train itself is amazing too. It's got these huge panoramic windows, so you don't miss a single bit of the scenery. Plus, there's that dining car serving traditional Swiss dishes. I'm already looking forward to lunch.
Yes! Speaking of food, we're definitely going to have to talk about Swiss cuisine at some point. But before we dive into that, let's talk a bit more about where we started this trip, Zermatt.
Zermatt and the Matterhorn. Starting the journey.
Zermatt, honestly, was like stepping into a winter wonderland. It's this picturesque alpine town where cars aren't allowed, so it's super quiet and peaceful. The only vehicles you see are these electric taxis or horse-drawn carriages, which adds to the charm.
Yeah, it's like a little hidden gem tucked beneath the Matterhorn. I'll never forget the first time we saw that mountain in person. It's so iconic, and you can understand why it's one of the most photographed mountains in the world.
I know. It's like something out of a storybook, towering over the village with its jagged, snow-covered peak. We actually did a bit of hiking around Zermatt, and the views of the Matterhorn from different angles were just mind-blowing.
The hike up to Gornergrat was especially amazing. It's not an easy climb, but the view from the top? Wow. You can see not only the Matterhorn, but also a whole range of other alpine peaks. And then there's the glacier. It felt like we were on top of the world.
Totally. The fresh mountain air, the sound of nothing but wind and distant waterfalls. It was surreal. And that moment when we stopped at that little alpine hut for some hot chocolate,
Oh man, that was the best hot chocolate I've ever had. I don't know if it was the altitude or just the fact that we'd been hiking for hours, but it tasted like heaven.
and the views didn't hurt either. Sitting there, sipping our drinks with the Matterhorn looming in the background was one of those travel moments I'll never forget.
On the Glacier Express, the scenic train ride continues.
So now, here we are on the Glacier Express, continuing our journey through Switzerland. The landscapes we're passing through are just so varied. We started in Zermatt with those dramatic alpine peaks, and now we're entering a lush green valley. It's crazy how quickly the scenery changes.
Yeah, and the villages. Every time the train slows down for a station, you catch glimpses of these perfect little Swiss villages. They all have those classic wooden chalets with flower boxes in the windows and cows grazing in the fields with bells around their necks. It's like Switzerland's countryside is showing off.
Totally. I've noticed that too. Every village we pass looks like it belongs on the cover of a Christmas card. I love how clean and orderly everything is here. The Swiss take such pride in their environment, and you can really tell.
It's so true. Everything is pristine, even in the more remote areas. And speaking of remote, we're about to go through one of the most scenic parts of this train ride, the Oberalp Pass. It's the highest point on the Glacier Express route, over 2,000 meters above sea level.
Yeah, I can already see the terrain starting to change. There's more snow here, even though it's summer. The mountains look so rugged and dramatic. I can't wait to see what the pass looks like.
Same here. I've read that once we reach the top, we'll be surrounded by snow-capped peaks and deep ravines. And there's this one spot where the train crosses a narrow bridge over a gorge. I think that's going to be a serious wow moment.
Definitely a camera moment. But one of the best things about Switzerland is how easy it is to get around. The train system here is so efficient and comfortable. We've barely had to think about logistics on this trip.
I know. It's like Switzerland was designed for travelers. The Swiss Travel Pass has been a lifesaver for us. You just hop on and off the trains, and it covers buses, boats, and even some mountain cable cars. It's made exploring so hassle free.
Lunch on the train, Swiss food adventures.
And speaking of hassle-free, here comes lunch. I've been looking forward to this. They're serving us a traditional Swiss meal, Rösti, which is basically fried potatoes topped with melted cheese and a fried egg. It's simple, but so good.
Rusty is like the ultimate comfort food. I love how crispy it is on the outside and soft on the inside. And that cheese, I don't know what it is about Swiss cheese, but it just tastes better here. Probably because it's fresh from the local cows.
Definitely. And to wash it down, we've got a glass of Swiss white wine. I've noticed that Swiss wines aren't as well known outside of the country, but they're really underrated. They're light and crisp, perfect for sipping while watching the Alps go by.
For sure. And then for dessert, they're serving us something I've been dying to try. Engadine Nut Tart. It's a specialty from the Engadine region, made with caramelized walnuts. I've heard it's pretty rich, but after all the hiking we've been doing, I think we've earned it.
Oh, no doubt. It's funny, I never used to think of Switzerland as a foodie destination, but I've been pleasantly surprised. Between the cheese, chocolate, fondue, and all these traditional dishes, it's been a culinary adventure as much as a scenic one.
Same here. And speaking of culinary adventures, we still have to try fondue at some point on this trip. I can't leave Switzerland without dipping bread into a pot of molten cheese.
Oh, we will. I'm thinking when we get to Lucerne, we should find a cozy little restaurant by the lake and have a proper fondue dinner. It just feels like the right place for it.
Exploring Lucerne, the next stop.
Yes, Lucerne. I'm so excited to get there. It's such a beautiful city, right on the shores of Lake Lucerne and surrounded by mountains. Plus, it's got that medieval charm with its old town and wooden bridges.
Yeah, Lucerne's definitely going to be a highlight. I'm especially looking forward to seeing the Chapel Bridge. That's the one with the old paintings in the roof, right? It's one of the oldest wooden bridges in Europe, and it's still standing strong after all these centuries.
Exactly. The Chapel Bridge is iconic, and the water tower next to it is just as picturesque. I've also read that there's a lion monument in Lucerne that's really moving. It's a huge sculpture carved into a rock face, commemorating Swiss guards who were killed during the French Revolution.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. They call it the saddest stone in the world. We should definitely check that out. And maybe take a boat ride on the lake while we're there. The views of the surrounding mountains from the water are supposed to be incredible.
Definitely. I love how Switzerland has so many layers to it, from the high mountain peaks to the lakes to the charming towns and cities. Everywhere you go, there's something new to discover.
You know, something else I've really come to appreciate on this trip is the Swiss culture. The people here are so friendly and welcoming, but also really respectful of nature and their traditions.
Absolutely, I've noticed that too. There's a real sense of pride in the local culture, whether it's through the food, the architecture, or even just the way they maintain their towns and villages. Everything is so well kept and preserved, but it never feels overly touristy or commercialized.
Yeah, I love that balance. And the fact that Switzerland has 4 official languages, German, French, Italian, and Romansh, just adds to its diversity. It's such a small country, but it feels like you're traveling through several different worlds depending on where you are.
That's so true. We started in Zermatt, where everyone was speaking Swiss German, and now, as we head toward the eastern part of the country, we'll start hearing more Romansh. It's amazing how multilingual the Swiss are. Everyone seems to speak at least 2 or 3 languages fluently.
Yeah, it puts my high school French to shame, but it's also made traveling here really easy. Most people speak English too, and they're always happy to help if we have questions.
And speaking of heights, we have to talk about Jungfrau. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm already so excited. It's known as the top of Europe, and it's the highest railway station on the continent.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. We'll be taking the Jungfrau Railway, which climbs through a tunnel carved into the mountain, and then we'll come out at this station at over 3,400 meters. The views are supposed to be mind-blowing.
And they have an ice palace there too. It's a whole complex carved out of ice with sculptures and tunnels you can walk through. It's going to feel like stepping into a different world.
For sure. I think Jungfrau is going to be one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences. We'll be standing on a glacier, surrounded by the highest peaks in the Alps, with views stretching across Switzerland, Germany, and France.
It's going to be epic. And I read that there's even an observation deck where you can look out over the Aletsch Glacier, the longest glacier in Europe.
Exploring Auckland, the city of sails.
New Zealand! I can't believe we're finally here. The flight was long, but it was so worth it.
Right? Just stepping off the plane in Auckland, I could already feel how different the air is here. It's so fresh and crisp, and I love that we're surrounded by the ocean. Auckland really lives up to its name as the city of sails.
Definitely. There's something so calming about being near the water, especially with all those yachts in the harbor. And I love how Auckland has such a relaxed vibe, even though it's the biggest city in New Zealand.
Yeah, it feels more like a big coastal town than a bustling metropolis. Everything seems so laid back, which is perfect because I'm in full vacation mode. I think we should start by exploring the waterfront area. I heard Wynyard Quarter is a great spot to check out.
Oh, absolutely. Wynyard Quarter has this cool mix of old and new. You've got the industrial history of the area, but now it's full of trendy cafes, restaurants, and parks. Let's walk around and grab some brunch with a view of the harbor.
Brunch, with a view. A taste of New Zealand cuisine.
I'm starving. The food here looks incredible. New Zealand cuisine is so fresh. I've heard they use a lot of local ingredients, especially seafood.
Yeah, I was reading that the emphasis on farm-to-table dining is huge here. Everything's local, organic, and just bursting with flavor. I'm thinking of trying the green-lipped mussels. They're supposed to be a New Zealand specialty.
That sounds amazing. I'm going to go for some fish and chips. I know it's simple, but New Zealand's known for having some of the best fish, and I can't pass it up.
Good choice. And I'm definitely going to need to try some of their famous coffee. I've heard the flat whites here are even better than in Australia.
Oh yeah, flat whites are a big deal here. I've heard the coffee culture in New Zealand is next level. I'm so ready for that caffeine kick. I still feel a little jet-lagged.
Same here. This whole day is going to be about taking in the beauty of the city and enjoying the food. I think after brunch, we should head up to Mount Eden. It's one of Auckland's volcanic cones, and the view from the top is supposed to be insane.
Climbing Mount Eden. Views of Auckland from above.
Wow, this view is incredible. You can see all of Auckland from up here. The harbor, the skyline, and even some of the other volcanic cones in the distance. It's so green and lush.
I know, right? I didn't realize Auckland was built on so many volcanoes. It gives the city such a unique landscape, and standing here at the top of Mount Eden, looking down into the crater, is surreal.
Yeah, the crater is massive. I love how it's been preserved as a sacred site for the Maori people, too. There's so much history tied into this place. It's not just a tourist spot, it has real cultural significance.
That's one of the things I love about New Zealand. The Maori culture is so deeply integrated into everyday life here. It's not just something in museums. You can see the influence everywhere, from the names of places to the art and architecture.
Totally. And it makes you appreciate the landscape even more, knowing how connected the Maori are to the land. I think that's something really special about New Zealand. There's this deep respect for nature and for the culture that's tied to it.
Absolutely. And speaking of nature, I think tomorrow we should get out of the city and explore some of New Zealand's famous natural landscapes. Maybe head up to the Bay of Islands or down to Rotorua.
Oh, Rotorua sounds amazing. The geothermal activity there is supposed to be mind-blowing. All the bubbling mud pools, geysers, and hot springs. Plus, it's another place where we can really dive into Maori culture.
Rotorua, the geothermal wonderland.
This is unreal. I've never seen anything like Rotorua in my life. The smell of sulfur is, well, it takes some getting used to, but it's worth it for these geothermal wonders.
I know what you mean. That eggy smell from the sulfur is intense, but it's so fascinating to see all these natural hot springs and geysers in action. It's like the earth is alive here.
The bubbling mud pools are so cool to watch. I could stand here for hours just looking at them. And did you see that massive geyser? It's like a mini volcano going off every few minutes.
Yeah, that's the Pahutu Geyser. It's the largest active geyser in the southern hemisphere, and it erupts pretty regularly. It's crazy to think that this kind of thing is happening naturally right beneath our feet.
And the colors. The mineral deposits around the hot springs make these vibrant hues: oranges, reds, greens, and blues. It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
Rotorua feels like a whole different world, honestly. I love how it combines natural beauty with such rich cultural history. The Maori presence here is really strong, and we've got that traditional hangi dinner to look forward to tonight.
Experiencing Maori culture, a traditional hangi dinner.
I'm so excited for this hangy dinner. Cooking food underground using heated rocks. It's such a cool tradition.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest forms of cooking, and I love how it's all about slow cooking the food, letting the steam and earth give it this incredible smoky flavor.
And it's a communal experience, which makes it even more special. I think food always tastes better when it's shared, especially when it's tied to tradition and history.
Exactly. It's such a meaningful way to connect with the land and the people. And the food looks amazing. Chicken, lamb, kumara, and those traditional vegetables. I can't wait to dig in.
I'm really enjoying learning about the Maori customs too. The storytelling, the music, and the haka. It's also powerful and rich in meaning. You can feel how much pride they take in preserving their culture.
The haka, in particular, is so intense. Watching it live, you can really feel the emotion and the strength behind it. It's not just a dance, it's a way of expressing identity, unity, and power.
Yeah, it's incredibly moving. I feel like this experience is giving us a much deeper understanding of New Zealand beyond just its natural beauty. The culture here is so integral to everything.
Adventure in Queenstown, the adrenaline capital of the world.
All right, it's time for some adventure. Queenstown, here we come. This is the adrenaline capital of the world, and I'm ready for it.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this ever since we started planning the trip. Queenstown has everything: bungee jumping, skydiving, jet boating, and some of the best hiking in the world.
I think we should start with something a little less extreme before we throw ourselves off a bridge. How about the shot over jet? I've heard it's one of the most thrilling jet boat rides out there.
That sounds perfect. I'm not quite ready for bungee jumping yet, but speeding down a river in a jet boat sounds like a blast.
The shot over jet, a high-speed adventure.
That was insane. I don't think I've ever gone that fast on water before. The way the boat skims over the river and does those 360-degree spins, it's like a roller coaster, but on water.
I know. My heart is still racing. The canyon is so narrow, and the way the driver maneuvers the boat so close to the rock walls, it's both terrifying and exhilarating.
And the scenery is breathtaking. The clear blue water, the rugged cliffs, and the speed, it's such a rush. Queenstown really knows how to get your adrenaline pumping.
I love how Queenstown combines adventure with nature. It's not just about the thrill. You're doing it all in this incredibly beautiful setting.
Hiking the Routeburn track, New Zealand's natural beauty.
After all that adrenaline, I'm glad we're slowing things down with this hike. The Routeburn track is supposed to be one of the best hikes in New Zealand, and so far, it's living up to the hype.
Yeah, it's stunning. We've got these lush green forests, crystal clear rivers, and snow-capped mountains in the distance. It feels like we've stepped into a postcard.
The air is so clean and fresh, too. I feel like I can breathe more deeply here, surrounded by all this nature.
And it's so peaceful. After the craziness of Queenstown's adventure sports, this is exactly what I needed. Just walking through this pristine landscape, listening to the birds and the sound of the river.
I love how diverse New Zealand is. You can go from bungee jumping to hiking in the same day and feel completely different vibes. Each experience here feels so unique.
Exactly. And the Routeburn track is such a perfect example of that diversity. The changing landscapes, from dense beech forests to alpine meadows, make each part of the hike feel like its own mini adventure.
And the views just keep getting better. I can't believe how lucky we are with the weather. The sun is shining, and the colors of the scenery are so vibrant.
It's stunning. I can see why this hike is so popular. And we're not even at the best viewpoint yet. I heard there's an amazing lookout point where we can see both Lake Routeburn and the surrounding mountains.
I can't wait! I've seen photos of it, and it looks absolutely breathtaking. It's moments like these that make all the effort worth it.
Reaching the viewpoint, a moment to remember.
We made it. Look at that view. It's absolutely incredible.
Wow. Just wow. The turquoise water of Lake Routeburn against the backdrop of those snow-capped peaks is something I'll never forget.
I can't believe we're actually here, witnessing this in person. It's even more beautiful than I imagined.
Let's take some photos to capture this moment. I want to remember how it feels to stand here, surrounded by this stunning landscape.
Great idea. But let's make sure we soak it all in first. Sometimes I think we rush to take pictures instead of just being present in the moment.
Agreed. I want to remember the sound of the wind, the fresh scent of the pine trees, and just how small I feel in comparison to all this beauty.
It's moments like these that remind you how incredible nature can be. There's something so grounding about being out here, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life.
After the hike, reflecting on New Zealand.
That hike was everything I hoped it would be and more. I feel so invigorated.
Me too. It's amazing how hiking can reset your mind and body. I feel like I could take on anything after that.
And we've only begun to scratch the surface of what New Zealand has to offer. I can't wait to see what else we'll experience in the South Island.
Next up, we should head to Milford Sound. I've heard it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, with stunning fjords and waterfalls.
Yes, I've seen pictures, and it looks like a dream. Taking a boat tour through the fjords sounds like the perfect way to explore.
Plus, we might even spot some wildlife. Dolphins, seals, and maybe even penguins. It's going to be such a memorable experience.
Milford Sound, nature's masterpiece.
Look at those cliffs. They rise straight out of the water. It's like something from a fantasy movie.
It's absolutely breathtaking. I can't get over how majestic Milford Sound is. The waterfalls cascading down the cliffs are stunning, especially with the mist rising up.
And the way the light hits the water creates such a beautiful reflection. This place feels almost otherworldly.
I know, and the wildlife. Look over there. I think that's a pod of dolphins swimming alongside the boat.
Wow, they're so playful. I love how they're jumping out of the water. It's such a magical experience to see them in their natural habitat.
And there's a seal lounging on that rock. They really do add to the charm of Milford Sound.
Every corner of this place feels like a new postcard. I'm so glad we decided to come here.
Enjoying the serenity. Kayaking in Milford Sound.
After the boat tour, how about we take it up a notch with some kayaking? I've heard it's a fantastic way to experience Milford Sound up close.
That sounds amazing. Paddling through the fjords, surrounded by all this beauty. It'll be such a unique perspective.
Plus, it'll be nice to have a quieter experience. The sound is beautiful, but the kayak will let us explore some of the smaller inlets and get away from the crowds a bit.
Exactly. I can't wait to glide through the water and soak it all in. Let's do it.
Kayaking adventure immersed in nature.
This is incredible. Paddling along these cliffs feels so intimate. I can hear the water lapping against the kayak and the sound of the waterfalls in the distance.
It really puts you in the heart of nature. I love how we can get so close to the cliffs. And the silence out here is just magical.
It's a completely different experience than being on the boat. I can feel the spray from the waterfalls, and it's like we're part of the landscape.
And look at those towering peaks. The way they reflect on the water is stunning. It's like a mirror.
I feel so connected to this place right now. Being in a kayak makes it all feel so much more personal.
And we've got the whole day to explore. I love that we can go at our own pace and find little hidden spots.
Agreed. This is the perfect way to wrap up our adventures in New Zealand. I can't wait to share all these memories when we get back home.
Farewell to New Zealand, reflecting on the journey.
As we get ready to leave New Zealand, I can't help but feel a little bittersweet. This trip has been absolutely amazing.
I know what you mean. Every moment here has been an adventure, from the vibrant cities to the stunning natural landscapes. It's hard to pick a favorite.
The variety is what makes it so special. We've experienced adrenaline, tranquility, and incredible cultural richness all in one trip.
And the people here have been so welcoming and friendly. It's one of those places that really feels like home, even if you're thousands of miles away.
I can't wait to share all our stories and experiences with friends and family. And who knows, maybe we'll find ourselves back here someday.
I hope so. New Zealand has definitely captured my heart. Until next time, beautiful landscapes and adventures await. I can't believe we're finally in Rome. It feels like we've stepped back in time. Everywhere you look, there's something ancient and incredible.
I know, right? This city is just steeped in history. The Colosseum, the Roman Forum, the Pantheon. I've only ever read about these places in history books, and now we're actually here, standing in front of them.
The Colosseum is mind-blowing. Standing in front of it, you can just imagine what it was like during gladiator battles. It's so well preserved for something that's nearly 2,000 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about all the history that happened here. The sheer size of it is overwhelming, too. It's like the ancient Romans were trying to show off just how powerful they were.
And they succeeded. It's a symbol of the grandeur of ancient Rome. It must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying to watch those games. But what I love is how, today, people from all over the world come here to marvel at it.
And the Roman Forum is right next door. I didn't realize how close everything is in the heart of the city. You can almost imagine people walking around in togas, discussing politics, and doing business.
The Forum really feels like the center of ancient Rome. Seeing all the ruins of temples and government buildings makes you realize just how advanced they were for their time. It was literally the hub of the Roman Empire.
It's hard to wrap my head around the fact that these ruins are thousands of years old. And yet, here they are, right in the middle of a modern city. It's like Rome is one big living museum.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Rome so special. You've got this incredible mix of old and new. Ancient ruins next to modern shops and cafes. It's such a unique vibe.
The Vatican. Art, architecture, and awe.
Speaking of mind-blowing places, how about the Vatican? I'm still in awe from seeing the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica. Peter's Basilica.
Oh my gosh! The Sistine Chapel was everything I imagined and more. Michelangelo's frescoes are just unreal. I could have stared at that ceiling for hours. The detail, the colors. It's a masterpiece in every sense.
It's one thing to see pictures of it, but standing underneath it, surrounded by that level of art, it's overwhelming. You can feel the weight of history and genius in that room.
And St. Peter's Basilica is just as incredible. The sheer size of it is jaw-dropping, and the inside is so ornate. Everywhere you look, there's another masterpiece, from the Pietà to the massive dome.
I loved how peaceful it felt inside, even with all the tourists. There's something about being in such a grand, spiritual space that makes you feel small, but also connected to something bigger.
And the view from the top of the dome, it's worth every single step. Seeing all of Rome spread out beneath us was unforgettable. You can see just how vast the city is, with its winding streets and ancient monuments.
Yeah, Rome looks completely different from up there. You get a sense of how sprawling it is, but also how beautifully it's laid out, with all the historic sites blending into the modern city.
It was the perfect way to end our day at the Vatican. It's such a humbling experience to be surrounded by that much history, art, and culture.
Food, glorious food, Roman cuisine.
After all that walking, I think we've earned a serious Italian meal. Rome is famous for its food, and I've been waiting to try some authentic pasta here.
Same! I'm thinking we go all in and try some of the classic Roman dishes. carbonara, cacio e pepe, maybe some saltimbocca.
Yes, I've been dreaming of Roman carbonara. No cream, just eggs, cheese, pancetta, and pepper. It's so simple but so delicious.
And cacio e pepe is another Roman specialty I can't wait to try. I love how the cuisine here is all about simplicity and using fresh, local ingredients. It's the epitome of less is more.
And don't even get me started on the wine. Italian wine is world famous for a reason, and we're in the heart of it. A glass of local red with some fresh pasta sounds like heaven.
Absolutely. Oh, and let's not forget dessert. We're going to need to try some tiramisu or gelato, or both. Rome is known for its incredible gelato, and I'm not leaving without having some.
I'm all for that. I think we need to do a gelato tour of Rome, trying all the different flavors from different places. What do you think?
That sounds like the best idea you've ever had. We'll walk it off, so it's totally justified. Let's start with dinner and then see where the night takes us.
Walking through history, Trastevere, and the Spanish Steps.
Trastevere is so charming. It feels like a completely different side of Rome. Narrow cobblestone streets, ivy-covered buildings, little trattorias around every corner. I love how it feels so local and authentic.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a postcard. It's so picturesque. And even though it's popular with tourists, it still feels like a hidden gem. There's a real neighborhood vibe here.
I think that's why I love it so much. It's a nice break from the hustle and bustle of the main tourist areas. And the food here is amazing. I think we had the best meal of the trip at that little family-owned restaurant last night.
Agreed. It felt like we were eating in someone's home. The pasta was so fresh, and the flavors were just out of this world. I'll never look at Italian food the same way again after this trip.
And now we're ending our night at the Spanish Steps. This is such a classic Roman spot. Sitting here, watching the world go by, feels so surreal.
It's like a scene from a movie. I can see why people come here to just relax and take in the atmosphere. It's the perfect place to people watch.
Rome at night is magical. The city takes on a whole new energy. The streets are alive with people, music, and the glow of the old buildings.
Yeah, it's got this romantic vibe, but also a sense of timelessness. The city never sleeps, and yet it feels peaceful at the same time.
The cradle of the Renaissance. Sarah, Florence. I can't believe we're here. This city is the birthplace of the Renaissance. The art, the architecture, the history. I've been dreaming about this for so long.
Me too. I can't wait to see the Duomo up close. I've seen so many photos of it, but nothing compares to standing in front of it in person. That dome is a masterpiece of engineering.
Brunelleschi was a genius. The way he designed that dome without any scaffolding, it's mind-boggling. And the marble facade of the cathedral is stunning. I love the mix of white, green, and pink stone.
It's so intricate, and the scale of it is enormous. Florence has such a different feel from Rome. It's smaller and more intimate, but it's packed with so much culture and history.
Yeah, Florence feels like an open-air museum. Every street is filled with beautiful buildings, sculptures, and hidden gems. And we haven't even gotten to the Uffizi Gallery yet.
I'm so excited to see the Uffizi. Some of the most famous paintings in the world are housed there. Botticelli's The Birth of Venus and Primavera, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. It's overwhelming.
I know! It's like every corner of Florence has something connected to the Renaissance. The Medici family really left their mark on this city. I feel like I'm walking through history with every step.
The art of Florence, Uffizi, and academia.
The Birth of Venus is even more beautiful in person. Botticelli's use of color and composition is just breathtaking. I never realized how large the painting is until I saw it up close.
Yeah, seeing it in person gives you a whole new appreciation for the detail. You can really see the emotion and movement in the figures. It's like Venus is floating right off the canvas.
And the Uffizi itself is such a stunning building. The long corridors filled with masterpieces from every corner of the Renaissance. It's almost overwhelming.
It really is. And to think that all of this art was commissioned by the Medici family. They were such patrons of the arts, and without them, who knows what the Renaissance would have looked like. Florence wouldn't be what it is today, that's for sure. I'm so glad we got to see Michelangelo's David at the Accademia, too. It's a masterpiece of sculpture. You can see every muscle, every detail. It's perfection.
It's incredible how lifelike it is. Michelangelo was such a master of human anatomy. David is so much larger than I expected. It has this commanding presence that's hard to describe.
It's like he's frozen in time, but you can feel the tension in his body, like he's about to spring into action. Michelangelo really captured the essence of heroism and human strength.
Florence has definitely lived up to the hype. The art, the history, the beauty. It's everywhere you look.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like I've been transported back in time to the height of the Renaissance.
Tuscan countryside, a peaceful escape.
After all the excitement in Florence, this Tuscan countryside is the perfect place to unwind. The rolling hills, the vineyards, the olive groves, it's like stepping into a painting.
It's so peaceful here. Tuscany is everything I imagined and more. The landscape is just endless stretches of green, dotted with those beautiful old farmhouses. It feels timeless.
I love how the pace of life here is so much slower than in the cities. Everyone seems to be in sync with nature, taking their time to enjoy the little things, like sipping wine on a terrace or watching the sunset over the vineyards.
Speaking of wine, I can't wait to visit some of the vineyards. Tuscany is famous for its Chianti and Brunello, and we're right in the heart of it. Wine tasting in Tuscany has always been on my bucket list.
Mine too. I love how wine is such an integral part of the culture here. It's not just something to drink, it's an experience, a celebration of the land and the people who cultivate it.
And the food! Tuscan cuisine is so simple yet so flavorful. I'm really looking forward to some hearty dishes like ribollita, pappardelle with wild boar, and of course the famous bistecca alla fiorentina.
Oh, yes. That steak is legendary. Thick, juicy, and grilled to perfection. I love how everything here revolves around fresh, local ingredients. It's all about letting the natural flavors shine.
Exactly. I think that's what makes Italian food so special. Whether it's in a high-end restaurant or a little family trattoria, you can taste the passion and tradition in every bite.
Wine tasting in Chianti, savoring the flavors.
Look at this place. It's like we've stepped into a postcard. Rows of grapevines as far as the eye can see, and that villa on the hill is straight out of a movie.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I can't believe we get to spend the day here, learning about winemaking and tasting some of the best wines in the world. This is exactly what I needed after all the sightseeing in Florence.
I love how the vineyards have been here for generations. The families who run them have such a deep connection to the land. You can tell they take so much pride in their work.
And the wine. I never knew Chianti could have so many different flavors. You can really taste the terroir, the soil, the climate, the history. Each glass tells its own story.
That's what makes wine tasting here so special. It's not just about the wine itself, but the whole experience. Sitting here, surrounded by these vineyards, with a glass of red in hand, feels like pure bliss.
And the olive oil. I had no idea Tuscany was so famous for its olive oil, too. It's so rich and flavorful, perfect for dipping that fresh bread they served us.
Tuscan olive oil is next level. It's so peppery and robust, with a real depth of flavor. I think we need to buy a few bottles to take home as souvenirs.
Definitely. I want to take a little piece of Tuscany home with me. This region has completely captured my heart.
Siena and San Gimignano, medieval charm.
Siena is just as charming as I thought it would be. The Piazza del Campo is so unique with its shell shape, and the whole city feels like it's straight out of the Middle Ages.
Yeah, Siena has such a distinct character. It's quieter than Florence, but in a good way. The narrow streets, the medieval buildings, and the vibrant colors, it all feels so authentic.
The Siena Cathedral is absolutely stunning. The black and white marble stripes on the outside and then inside All the intricate details, the frescoes, the sculptures. It's like a work of art in itself.
It's one of the most beautiful cathedrals I've ever seen. And the view from the Torre del Mangia, wow. You can see the whole city and the rolling hills beyond. It really gives you a sense of Siena's history and its place in Tuscany.
I also love how Siena has kept its medieval traditions alive, like the Palio horse race. I wish we could be here during the race. It sounds like such an exciting, intense event.
I've read that the whole city comes alive with passion and rivalry during the Palio. The different neighborhoods, or contrade, are so competitive, but it's all in good fun. It's one of those traditions that really connects the people to their history.
Speaking of history, I'm excited to head to San Gimignano next. I've heard it's like a medieval Manhattan with all those towers. It's going to be so cool to see that skyline in person.
San Gimignano, the city of towers.
San Gimignano is unreal. Walking through these streets feels like we've stepped back in time. And those towers, I've never seen anything like them.
It's amazing how well preserved this town is. It really does feel like you're in the Middle Ages. And those towers were originally built as a display of wealth and power. The higher your tower, the more important you were.
It's crazy to think about. Imagine living in a time when your status was literally measured by the height of your tower. But today, it just makes for one of the most unique skylines in Italy.
And the views from the top of the towers are spectacular. You can see the rolling hills of Tuscany with vineyards and olive groves stretching out for miles. It's like a picture-perfect Tuscan postcard.
I love how this town has maintained its medieval character while still being full of life. The shops, the little cafes, the gelato places. It's got such a charming atmosphere.
Oh, speaking of gelato, we need to try the famous gelato here. There's that world-renowned gelateria in the main square. I've heard it's the best in Italy.
Yes, please. After all that climbing and walking, I think we've earned it. Plus, you can't come to Italy without indulging in as much gelato as possible.
Venice, the floating city.
Venice is even more magical than I imagined. Floating down the canals in a gondola, passing under those beautiful bridges, it feels like a dream.
Venice really is one of a kind. There's no other city like it in the world. The canals, the narrow alleyways, the palazzos. It's like stepping into another era.
The Grand Canal is breathtaking. All those old, crumbling buildings right on the water's edge, with the gondolas and vaporettos passing by. It's so romantic and atmospheric.
And Piazza San Marco is incredible. St. Mark's Basilica with its golden mosaics, the Doge's Palace, the whole square feels so grand and majestic.
It's hard to believe that Venice was once one of the most powerful and wealthy cities in the world. You can still feel that history in every corner. The Venetians were master traders, and you can see how that wealth built this incredible city.
The architecture here is so unique. I love how the buildings are a mix of Byzantine, Gothic, and Renaissance styles. Venice was such a melting pot of cultures because of its role as a trading hub.
And the food. Venetian cuisine is so different from what we've had in other parts of Italy. Lots of seafood, risotto, and those delicious cicchetti, the little appetizers you get at the bars.
I'm loving the seafood risotto and the sardines in Siena. It's cool how Venice has its own distinct culinary traditions. And of course, the wine is fantastic here too.
Gondola ride, a Venetian experience.
This gondola ride is everything I hoped for. Gliding through the canals, with the sound of the water and the gondolier singing softly, it's so peaceful and romantic.
It really is. You get to see a different side of Venice from the water. The canals are like the streets here, and it's such a unique way to experience the city.
I love passing under all the little bridges and seeing the old palaces reflected in the water. Venice feels like a living work of art.
It does. And even though it's crowded with tourists, there are still these quiet moments, like this one, where you feel like you have the city all to yourself. I can't believe our time in Italy is coming to an end. It's been such an incredible journey.